Feel the real with Bose Quiet Comfort Ultra earbuds. Breakthrough immersive audio makes everything sound crazy natural. High-fidelity sound and world-class noise cancellation are tailored to your ears only, so everything hits just as it should. Dive in deeper at bose.com/Spotify.
Okay, we're rolling. How do you feel?
I'm feeling good.
The voice you are hearing is Karen Bliss. She is a longtime music journalist, and we've been talking about doing this for quite some time. Thanks for being my comeback from the summer off of the Women in Media podcast. You're my first episode back.
Thank you for allowing me after all the delays.
Just a little content trigger warning here. The conversation that we're going to have will reference allegations surrounding some sexual violence and perhaps some graphic content. Could be upsetting to some of my listeners. So I just want to let you know that before you dive any further into this episode. And we're going to talk about your career first. Being a music journalist at this time, in this climate, I think is a huge accomplishment on its own. But coming out of the pandemic, tell me what you've been working on and how you're feeling about the state of things as a writer in this country.
It's the hardest it's ever been since I was in my late teens, early 20s, to be honest. There's not a lot of work. There really isn't. And the major outlets that I write for have either diminished their budgets or frozen their budgets. Everyone has to be really careful coming out of COVID, and it's definitely impacted me.
So just to give, a couple things on the resume, you've been writing for a really long time. How many years now? Like 2023 is how many years?
It's quite a few decades. Yeah. I actually started when I was a teenager, between high school and university. And then I wrote for, the school paper at U of T and did a radio show, and I just kept at it and at it and at it. But it's probably been 30 years, I would say.
You may know Karen's work from Billboard. You've been a longtime Canadian correspondent for Billboard since 2010. And we're going to talk about a very important piece that you wrote for them coming up. But just to go back, venturing into music journalism, when did you know? If you're writing for the school paper, how did you find the music element?
Well, I loved music in my teens. And as soon as I was able, I doctored my driver's license, and I would use that to get into the bars to see bands. And at that time, you could walk into like a clothing store or a record shop, and there'd be like tickets on the counter for some show coming up. I'm really dating myself now. This is not like me. The Copa, the Diamond, and other venues. And I would see everything, and I would save my meager lunch money to buy records, to go to concerts. I didn't care if it was big band, small band. So that's what I did. I had no talent. I did try and take guitar lessons. And unfortunately, I thought I was too old back then. Kids are so stupid. So I just never continued. And, I would get all the music magazines and read them all voraciously. And that was the way to kind of marry my passion for music with the talent that I did have.
I'm actually quite envious of you because, like when they went around class, I remember in our first year of Fanshawe College, I did a degree diploma with Fanshawe. They asked us what we wanted to be, like what our, desire was to come out of the program to do. And with zero fear, was like, I'm going to be a music journalist.
Well, you're a music journalist of sorts.
Of sorts, but you take twists and turns along the way. But my first love, it sounds a lot like you. I used to write for the school paper. My first love has always been writing, so I'm quite envious. But out of all these interviews that, like, if you look at Karen's CV just for like 5 seconds, there's a long list of interviews. Everyone from the Backstreet Boys and the Spice Girls to like Jimmy Page and Kurt Cobain. Has there been an interview that really stuck out over the years as a moment in time you'll never forget?
Yes.
Yes, actually.
I would love to interview Eddie Vedder again, because
Eddie Vedder.
I knew about Mother Love Bone, and I think one of the guys that told me about their, new group, and I was at CMJ in New York, and I went to see Pearl Jam. I think I went twice, and freaking Eddie Vedder, man, so good. And I listened to 10 over and over and over again. So by the time I interviewed him, It's a pretty silly interview in a way. I mean, it's good, but it's funny. You can find it because I think I sold it to an outlet when there was an anniversary, maybe an induction or something.
We'll link to it in the show notes if we've got it.
Yeah. I just really enjoyed talking to him. And at the end of the conversation, he was like, if you need anything else, just call. And all these years later, I've never interviewed him again because they're just one of those acts that they don't really do a lot of interviews. And when you're a freelancer, even if I have regular clients, when it comes to those acts, it's always the staff or the editor that wants to do the interviews. Like I would love to interview Keith Richards. Yeah, I've interviewed him for like 3 minutes on a red carpet, but he was, my fave growing up. Never had a chance to sit down with him. Springsteen, another one, because no editor is going to say, Karen, you go interview Keith, you go interview Bruce. But I've interviewed some great people, Eminem in the early days and Shania in the early days, D12, Metallica. Britney, I was one of the first people, if not the first person in Canada to interview Britney, Christina. There's been a lot.
Have you learned that there's something in common with all these people? They're all super famous people, different genres of music, different goals in life. But is there anything you've learned from all these big names?
I learned something from every person I talk to. I am primarily a music industry writer. I do both. But I learned a lot about the music industry by talking to people in the music industry and being out at the venues and, getting to know the managers and the A&R people and the publishers and the agents. And we would exchange, like, go see this act, or we just signed this act, or, there's been a few artists that I've actually turned on to people in the industry every couple of years. I drive an artist around to meet people in the industry. Like, I love doing that. And I love talking to creative people. So I ask the questions I want to know the answers to.
We've sort of referenced your work with The Samaritan. It's an online music magazine, and you're basically looking to shine the light on good people in the industry trying to combat bad things.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. It's been dormant for well over a year. Unfortunately, I lost my funding. And as a writer myself, I don't want to get people to write for free. I want to pay people,
of course,
for their work. And unfortunately, it's actually not just about the industry or musicians trying to make a difference. It's about anyone, but given the nature of my career, it started being very music heavy, which is great. And, I've had Bryan Adams telling me that he was proud of me, and Justin Timberlake I was interviewing for another outlet, and I asked him a question about, causes and charities, and he was like, why'd you ask me that? And I told him about the Samaritan, and he said, that's a great idea, and you should talk to my publicist. So I lost my funding for that. I am going to bring it back somehow, but I really had to concentrate on finding more work as a journalist before I can put more time into that. There is a great company that I think I am going to be partnering with.
Okay.
And, the people that run it have the same mindset as me, and they're pretty cool. So I hope that will come to something maybe in the new year.
So there is a piece that you wrote for Billboard that was published this summer. The headline read, Canadian radio promoter Adrian Strong, a sexual predator, women say. And I mean, you and I have been in touch for, I would call it 4 years now. I think we met and really spent some time together, got to know each other outside of just seeing each other at concerts when we went to Nunavut for a music week up there. But, in that time after getting to know you, when we kept in touch and I said I wanted to have you on this podcast, it had nothing to do with this piece that we're about to talk about. I just thought your career was very interesting. And you said, well, I'm working on something right now, which I'd love to discuss more, but it's going to be a while before I can talk about it. This took over your life for a couple of years. So talk to me about how this story landed in your lap, in your inbox, and why you felt the need to cover it.
I've never done a story like this before. So all these decades, thousands of articles I've written, this is completely out of my wheelhouse. But it is an important story. What happened was in November 2019, a woman who went by Noire posted on her Instagram a photo of Adrian Strong with the words incel rapist with arrows pointing to his face. And next to it was a very graphic story about something that happened to her 10 years prior, an alleged rape in Charleston. She alleges that he drugged her, confined her for 18 hours, and cut a section of her scalp.
I remember reading this post when it was on social media at the time.
Yeah, it circulated. Everyone I know saw it. It was sent to me. I've known Adrian probably 20 years. And it was very detailed. It wasn't necessarily long, but it definitely included, names and places.
Some key pieces.
Immediately called my editor at Billboard, said, can I look into this? He said, of course. I didn't really know what I was doing. I called up the Peel Police, asked for the media department, do you have a report? I didn't even know her real name. So I asked if it was under Adrian Strong. Essentially, they said no. Then I'm trying to dialogue with her, and she was kind of responsive, but she was actually dealing with someone else in the music industry who had reached out to her as an ally. And that person, little did I know, over the subsequent 2 weeks, was saying some pretty nasty things about me, quite frankly. So Noire was accusing me of, being friends with Adrian. And I did see some of the exchanges, and that it was that I hate women and I'm probably working for Adrian and I shouldn't be using Billboard's name. And, it was very upsetting, actually, because I don't think there's anything worse that a woman can say about another woman. But at that time, I had already talked with another woman who, it was off the record, but she told me her story. And so that was 2 people that had stories about Adrian. I also had taken the time to go through his Facebook page because we're Facebook friends. And I went through 10 years, took hours.
Oh.
And I was screenshotting. There were some mentions of Charleston, of Hilton Head, of Marriott's, all things that were in her post. And then I got to the date that she alleges that he raped her. And it says, Noire is the new black. And Noire was spelled Noire, the way she spells it. So when I saw it, I took a screenshot, sent it to my editors. It was something that I felt that I should pursue. And they did too. But by then, I think another outlet had told Noire that they were going to do something. It was a bit of a mess after kind of this sabotage initially. This other guy had said that he would interview her for a podcast and that 20 people had come forward to him. I spoke with him. I was a little skeptical, but I said, please, take it. I obviously can't, do this piece. What I didn't realize at the time is that there has to be a charge in order for me to be able to access the reports. So Noire put the request in. She can only get her reports. Because there's no charges, she can't get any of the reports if they had gone to speak with Adrian. So she put those requests in, same with the hospital records. And, it's Christmas time. My aunt passed away January. I go to England for the funeral, come back, and it's essentially COVID. So nothing happened. All throughout COVID, DMD still very, very active. People are still hiring them.
That's Adrian's company. I don't think we've mentioned that yet. The company that he formerly was a part of. And just so you know, we will have a link to this article if you want to read the article before you listen to the rest of this conversation in the show notes.
So what Adrian does is he's a radio tracker. And in Canada, he would do pop radio, top 40 radio. So he is promoting singles to radio, building relationships with those formats and radio stations with the people there. So that's what he did. And he had some very, very big clients. So he's very successful for very many years. And, and I've known him too.
Me too.
So what happened was the following year, I don't have a lot of work. I find out that they've been using my name to a few people. I don't know how many, but enough for them to contact me saying, well, Karen Bliss tried to do a story, because people would say like, well, what about this post? They're like, oh, it's nothing, was BS, Karen Bliss tried to do a story. I should say I also had texted Adrian around that time. And I said,
would you like to comment?
If you have a comment, I tried to get a report. I called Peel Police and they didn't have a report. He did not contact me back, but I did send that. So, he could have shown that to anyone. At that time, that was true. But by then, I had spoken with multiple women. And so I contacted DMD and had a pretty long conversation with one of the people there. And he did message me back and he said, I've told everyone there not to use your name anymore and they understand. I said, thank you very much. And I was out for lunch with one of Adrian's friends and nothing was ever mentioned. I was there to meet with him about something else, but something he said started, me thinking again. And he said, the only person that's benefited from COVID is Adrian. And in a way that was true because everyone retreated into their own lives, right? It was very, scary, unpredictable time for everyone. And I didn't have a lot of work, as I said, and I went home and I called my editor and I said, can I try this again? And he said, yes. And I didn't tell anyone this time because I didn't want to be sabotaged. I just wanted to do it on my own. And I just dug in.
I want to stop you for a second there. How are you feeling at this point? You've gone after this story in a few different paths and it hasn't worked out.
Yeah.
And you're hearing more and more about what this person was potentially capable of. How do you feel as a woman?
I mean, I have to say it's very difficult to hear a woman talk to you for 2 hours about an alleged assault in great, great detail. I don't have experience with this. I have to be careful not to re-traumatize them. I have to ask for corroborating evidence and also people that I can speak to that they told at that time without making them feel like I'm attacking them or I don't believe them. I mean, it's very important in journalism that you corroborate the information that you're getting. And I had to do it with sensitivity and tact. And I'm sure there were times they were just upset with me or frustrated because it took a very long time. But also, I'm freelance. I'm self-employed. And my editors are very, very busy at Billboard. At first, I dealt with my news editor, who I talk to every day. And he's fantastic. Yeah, I can't even tell you how great an editor he is, and so understanding, and really would listen to my zillions of phone calls about the latest developments or issues or other things I needed to get. His name's Colin Stutz, and he really had my back the entire way.
He believed in the story.
Yeah. So I also spoke with men who had their own stories about kind of stepping in, almost like the close calls. I have to be careful here, and I want to make it very, very clear that Adrian has denied all allegations.
Yeah, we have this statement right here if we need to read it. I categorically deny sexually assaulting or drugging anyone. And in the past decade, our industry has gone through a lot of change when it comes to understanding power dynamics. In my 20s and 30s, I had romantic relationships with artists that were consensual, which was not uncommon in the industry. I am now accused of being sexually abusive and using my position in an exploitive way during that time. I wholeheartedly deny these claims. These allegations have given me pause to reflect on what I have done or could be doing better. I never intended to cause anyone pain.
We ended up obviously dealing with his lawyers, and they did send their evidence, and we used all of it. I'm kind of jumping around here, but
That's okay.
So I investigated for a very long time and, would speak with someone that they told at that time. Meanwhile, I should say that Noire did get the police reports for me and the hospital records, which were very, if you read the article, she went through, she's a person of color, and she perceives that she was not treated very well by the police or by the medical personnel. You can read all about that. And I had to kind of sift through all that. So ultimately, no charges were laid. So this was, 2009. But, she also provided the records from her social worker. I did speak with her social worker. I also want to say that people are not named in the article. They are not anonymous. They are confidential sources. I think people get confused. They think that I don't know who they are. I have their full names. I have their contacts. I interviewed all these people for a very long time. For whatever reason, and they don't need a reason, they are not named in it. The story's very, very long, but I did speak with the women multiple times, sometimes for hours. You can read all about that in the article.
Yeah. It's even tough to read as, someone in the industry being like, oh, what's this about? It's hard to read regardless of who you are.
Very, very hard to read.
And while I'm thinking about the women that have come forward with their stories in this piece, I'm also thinking about you as a journalist and the challenges surrounding your writing, your career. Did you have any fear at the time?
Yeah, of course. I did. I would say, so by this time, as I'm putting the piece together, the first draft, and there were many, many drafts, Billboard brought in an executive editor, Frank DiGiacomo, and he's fantastic. Yeah, he was the one that really, he's got fresh eyes. He doesn't know the story the way Colin does, because Colin was there the whole, every step of the way. And he really helped me shape the piece and told me what was needed. There were or are lawyers involved at Penske and at Billboard as well. But also, I was reaching out during this time, like not only am I a voracious reader of news pieces, particularly investigative pieces, but I was watching, there was a fantastic panel with the journalist from TSN who broke the hockey sexual assault story.
Hockey Canada.
So I was watching things like that. And I also reached out to Kevin Donovan, who is hands down probably the best investigative reporter in Canada. He writes for the Toronto Star. And he, was working on the Sherman case. He's on a book. There's a series. There's a podcast. And he was so helpful. He told me about the Responsible Journalism Act in Canada.
So you're learning things about your line of work along the way.
100%. Because, I go to concerts for a living,
What'd you learn?
What I learned, and it's very important, is that I had to go to Adrian often with these allegations, points of fact, and ask him to respond and give him ample time to respond. That was crucial. And he also, Kevin, suggested we retain a Canadian lawyer too, because our laws are different here. And it's a very convoluted kind of situation because I'm Canadian, Billboard's American, Adrian's Canadian, Noire's Canadian. The alleged assault happened in America. The other women, it happened in Canada, but you got the idea. So Billboard was fantastic. They retained the Canadian lawyer for me as well. They also have kind of a security safety expert on staff who talked to me a couple of times. So Kevin was fantastic. I also contacted Billy Jensen from watching one of the true crime shows, and he's also investigative reporter, and he contacted me. This was actually before I talked to Kevin. I explained what was going on, and I told him what I had discovered so far, because I had texts and screenshots and all kinds of information from the women and things that I found myself. And he thought I had enough. Little did I know, I did not. So, yeah, it was definitely a lot of work. So in March was when the editors, the lawyers
of this year, 2023, and this started in 2019. That just paints the picture.
Yeah, mainly 2021, I have to say, was when.
Yeah. But even like pasting this article so I could read it offline into a Word document, it was 17 pages, text only.
It could have been longer.
Streaming October 6th on Paramount Plus.
First place I learned about death was a pet cemetery. Dead things buried in that land would come back as something else. Something's wrong with Timmy.
He needs time to adjust.
That's not Timmy. Something's talking through him.
Sometimes dead is better.
Pet Cemetery, Bloodlines, rated R. Streaming only on Paramount Plus.
This episode is brought to you by Pete's. Few things start your day better than a good coffee. That's why Pete's hand roast their coffee from a specific selection of high-quality beans. And they don't just put those beans into anyone's hands. Pete's trains their roasters for 10,000 hours so they can master the roast that gives you the most. Pete's Coffee. Coffee for coffee people. Find Pete's online or at your local retailer.
Okay, so now we're in 2023 in March.
Now we're in 2023. So bear in mind, no one in my family, most of my friends do not know. Some of them know I'm working on something. They don't know what. I did confide in a couple of people far removed from the music industry. So I was dealing with this myself. I would wake up in the middle of the night. It's almost like a post-traumatic stress disorder. Like it's a lot when you live by yourself and you're hearing all these stories and going back to the women and, you know, and they're experiencing it too, I'm sure, because they're reliving something that happened a long time ago, right? And something that changed, ultimately destroyed their lives for that time period where they left the country and, you know, didn't follow the career path that they wanted.
Their dreams.
One of them did, and she's quite successful, which I'm happy about. That part's heartbreaking too. But, you know, I contacted him. I sent the email. I remember sitting there and sending the email, and it was like, he knows. Like that was weird. And I wanted to interview him. Love to interview him. I want him to respond to all these points of fact and allegations. And, you know, there were over 70 of them. And it could be as simple as, you know, did you meet Noire at Canadian Music Week? They weren't all about the actual assault. It was just like points of fact. And,
right,
you know, he responded that he was traveling and it would be like next week. And then it was Thanksgiving. And, you know, and then I tried to get more specific, like giving deadlines, and asked repeatedly. I mean, I don't need to go over all the times, but at least a dozen times I asked to meet in person. I even called the Rivoli to see like if someone would be around, you know, if I was going to go and meet him there. I set days, you know, aside. I said I would do it by Zoom, by phone. He said like, oh, he was in rural UK and couldn't answer. I should also mention he went silent on all social media as soon as Noire made that post. So he kept his accounts, but never again posted.
From 2019, was that?
Yes. So his biggest clients at that time, like The Weeknd, was on the Super Bowl, no posts. You know, Blinding Lights, huge song, no posts. So there was nothing else for me to monitor. But, you know, I was looking. You know, DMD still got clients. And I did see him at an event during COVID. I don't know if you saw me, but it was for an artist at the Soho House.
I just have to say, too, I saw him on a flight on my way back from a conference. And when I walked past him, I had read that post from Noire maybe 2 months before. And yeah, my skin was crawling just even being on the same flight. And he saw me and I saw him, and he immediately looked down. He did not want to be seen. Yeah.
I mean, there were people that were still hanging out with him from the industry. And, these were allegations, right?
Yep.
And the article hadn't come out. So I said, well, can you answer some of these questions on a rolling basis? Like, you can answer, you don't need to access anything to be able to say, were you here, were you there? But all he responded was, I have to access my old computers and cameras, which are in storage. So it just kept getting delayed. It went from May 1st to May 26th. May 26th, when he said he would talk to me or respond to the allegations, we get the letter from the lawyer. And then it continued a little longer. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, because I know a lot of people in the industry, they're talking about shutting down DMD and the two people that work underneath them starting their own company. So they didn't wait till my article came out. This was a decision they made to get ahead of the article. Mm-hmm. Well, that was going on, but there was nothing I could do. The women were frustrated because we're giving him all this time and he's just delaying and not giving us anything. But ultimately, you'll see what we did get from him. He sent a couple of photos, which he alleges.
They're in the article.
That Noire, had no visible bruises or anything. He sent those in. And there were a couple of other points where he answered and everything he wanted in is in. And these are all like directives also from my editors. Like, every line has been vetted, Like, I'm not just working on my own. So
yeah, there's a big group of people at this point working on it.
I sent an email to all the labels and asked them to pass it on to any management or publicists that needed to know, based on the artists that were actually mentioned in the piece, nothing nefarious. It was simply that DMD had worked singles for these artists,
Right. Yeah.
So at that point, I remember sending it, and my heart, I was like, now the whole industry knows. And I actually felt safer. I wanted to protect the women in so many ways along the way. And I maintain that to this day. But I also, living by myself, and I know these are, all alleged, but I do live by myself. I do park in the back, and interestingly, when I sent the email telling him I was doing the story, the next day I got Ring cameras put in. The next day, some guy came walking up the side of my house, looked right at the camera, muttered, "She has a camera," and left. Didn't look at my other neighbor because it's a kind of a shared driveway. I was like, is that a coincidence? Or does this happen all the time? And it's, I just never caught it.
And we'll never know.
We'll never know. But it's never happened again since I had the cameras. But, I'm probably being paranoid. But that's how you feel when you're a woman living alone, working on a story like this. So, I did have the police here. They did come to my house, and I did tell them the story I was working on, and they looked around my house and told me put blinds and do this, and they were lovely. And they followed up to check up on me. Billboard also had, as I mentioned, someone that they retained that talked to me as well. They're an amazing, amazing publication and organization. I'm very grateful.
So coming out of the publishing of this story, it's been a couple months now. Do you feel like this story has been done justice?
I mean, I'm very happy it came out and that people read it. And I didn't know when it was coming out because, I would read it again and go, we have to change this. This one word would change the meaning of a sentence. I'm not joking, when every single sentence has been vetted. There's reasons I chose specific wording. And Sinead O'Connor died that same day. And it was Mick Jagger's 80th birthday. It was a big, big music day. And I got a lovely email from a fellow writer at Billboard who I don't know, but she's an incredible writer. And she said, I worked on a piece that, was a fraction of the size, and can't imagine the the stress he went through, and I actually started crying, right?
How can you not? Yeah, it's a big relief.
It was like this, I'm going to start crying now. It was like 2 years of this. And, and the next person was Noire. And she said, I'm about to read it. And 45 minutes later, I hadn't heard from her. And there were people that did not believe her. And that is in the article. And I didn't know what kind of response I would get. And she said it was like a weight lifted off her shoulder. And all the women contacted me and said similar. And then I started getting messages from men in the industry. A huge producer sent me a email that he was proud of me and he's never seen me write a piece like this. Not this is all on me, but those were it was really nice to hear because I didn't know what kind of response I would get. And it's a very small industry.
Of course.
I know people say I didn't read it because I don't know him. It's not about him. It doesn't matter if you know him or you don't know him or he's just a radio guy. And, Billboard didn't know DMD. They don't care. They're an American publication, right? They don't know who Adrian is. This is a public interest, a human interest story. The people need to know and give these women a voice and a place to tell their story. And it's been corroborated. Every one of their stories have been corroborated by someone they told at that time. One had police reports and hospital records. His name is throughout. His name is in there. So...
No, but you're right. We get wrapped up in the music industry part of this. But when you look at that article, there's sections that say related, Marilyn Manson. Then there's another section that I think I saw something related to Russell Brand. And funny enough, you and I had gone back and forth a lot before doing this interview. And you had sent me a note about BBC and a Russell Brand article. And you had sort of mentioned, I really like the way that this was handled. What did you appreciate about that article in maybe comparison to what we're talking about right now?
Well, I guess that they acknowledged the women's stories and were investigating right away. I wish that when this post was made in November 2019, that people who used his services, who employed him, would have taken action then.
Ask the questions at the very least.
And then I wouldn't be talking to you about this. I wouldn't have had to spend all this time. I don't want to be doing this. This story is not something I would ever wish on anyone or what the women have gone through. I want to go write about concerts. I want to talk, to a musician about the song they wrote, and go in the studio. And that's what I want to do. And I know that her story is severe. And I know a lot of people didn't believe it. And I get that. But at least investigate,
Speaking of which, so after contacting these companies, did anyone agree to share anything publicly and do proper investigations?
Well, in the article, DMD, the person who owned DMD, which I actually thought all these years was Adrian because he was the president, but it actually wasn't. And I think a lot of people in the industry also thought it was Adrian. But yeah, the person you'll see in the article did say that he hired a law firm and would be investigating. I don't know the outcome of that investigation, if it's still ongoing and if those findings will be made public. I hope so. If Adrian, as he acknowledged in his email to me, has old computers and cameras, I don't know if that's part of DMD, if they can, have access to those and his emails. I don't really know how that works. I just know how I investigated this. It's a lot of work. But I don't know what the answer is, it's hard for someone that's known someone for so long to believe these types of stories. They are allegations, but you can read it and come to your own conclusions. I didn't get any thank you for investigating, we should have done this, or oh my God, I had no idea. I'm going to, go back and see if I can find something. Like, no one ever said that to me. I got probably 200 messages from people outside that world, and I've spoken to a few women since that have told me some stories too, like one of whom he worked her first single. And then when it came to the second single, because her album didn't do very well, he said, well, I'll work the second single if you come to my place and give me lap dances. Allegedly, he said that to her. That's what she told me. Another woman, I won't go into too many details, but she woke up in his office. He was spooning her. There's a few stories like that have come out since. And,
it only adds to the greater discussion.
Yeah. Anyone that can contact me, there's an email address at the end of the Billboard article.
I'll have it in the show notes too.
They want to share any stories relating to Adrian Strong and any allegations. This is not about the music industry in a way,
Right.
like all the women's stories, they span 10 years. One, the person that I spoke to on Zoom for 2 hours, there were a lot of patterns. You'll see some patterns in alleged behavior. She, for whatever reason, didn't want her full story shared, but she wasn't in the music industry. Like, she met him on a dating site called Seeking Arrangement, and no interest in the music industry. So it's not really about the music industry, but I wish that the smaller companies would have, I don't know what the answer is, something in place to not let someone go unjustly, unfairly, without doing an investigation, but put them on some kind of leave and have, some kind of investigator. I don't know if a lawyer can do this or it has to be someone else. That I know there's privacy issues and all that, but it's not me taking 3 years of my life to investigate someone.
No. And you know what? There's a lot of parallels here. I'm thinking about the Hockey Canada investigations. And publicly, there was an outcry for information to be shared. And maybe because this was, a lesser known person with a lesser known public profile, maybe that's the reason. But the allegations are just as serious. I guess the actions that followed from these companies, we just don't hear about how they've actually played out. We've only heard a check mark. Yeah, we did that. So that's where, as a woman in this business, or just as a woman, that's not enough.
Yeah. I wish there was more dialogue and people weren't so afraid for their jobs and their finances. I know people have to pay their bills, but some things are more important,
Any fallout that you can speak to after writing a piece like this?
So the majority of feedback has been very supportive and positive, and to my surprise, asking about me. So people have that insight, which is really amazing. There are a couple of companies that are very angry with me. Yeah.
See, that's interesting. The Me Too movement was started when? 2017? So we're years past, and there's still some individuals or groups that would be angry.
I mean, they might not understand how a story like this is done. They might not understand the vetting process, the lawyers. If you're going to be angry with me, you got to be angry with Billboard. No one's going to blacklist Billboard, but they can easily blacklist me. I'm the little person, I'm easy. I'm dispensable, right? They don't need me. So I'm okay. I'm okay with it. I was fully prepared. I have no regrets. This story had to be written. If it wasn't written,
Yes.
I don't know what would happen. These women needed to tell their stories. Noire needed to have someone take that post and investigate. And she did everything right. She went to the police. She went to the hospital. She made that post. I'm glad she finally trusted me to tell her story, because I can't imagine how it felt for her after 10 years to make that post, emboldened by the Me Too movement, right? That she makes this post and nothing happened. Nothing happened, right? For a long time. And, she was definitely frustrated with me over that time period. I mean, that's a long period of time. And I kept having to go back to her to like fact check and timeline and fill this in and fill that in. And it wasn't because I didn't believe her and I didn't want to re-traumatize her. It's just we had to have those details. And this is also from my editors, right?
Of course, yeah.
And I trust them. They know what they're doing. And we had lawyers. My editors, the Penske lawyer, the Canadian lawyer said, yeah, we're ready. Then it went to the Billboard lawyer and to the head of editorial, Hannah Karp. And they read it through fresh eyes. Might have been a few other changes and a few other additions and things I had to do. And then they said, yes, it is ready. Even like the Weinstein story, a lot of those take a lot of time,
Yeah, and people are not aware.
Those people are on it like every day, and they have like a supportive team. I have respect for those investigative journalists that do it all the time.
And congratulations to you for getting a piece like that out when you had never done something like that before. It's a huge article. And, I'm not done sharing it yet because I don't think enough people know yet. Like you said, human interest story. Anything from their clients since between now and then?
The two people that worked under Adrian started a new company. I think they have some of the same clients. I don't know what Adrian is. I don't know what happened. I don't know what his response is. I don't know any of his friends in the industry, what they said to him, what he said to them. I don't know any of that.
Was there not a part in that article where one of the women grew very frustrated seeing people party with him at Coachella, some of our Canadian colleagues?
Yeah, that was Noire. I guess either she saw a photo of him with a couple of key players in the industry, or someone sent it to her and she reposted it. Yeah, she was not happy with that.
Well, I can't say enough in congratulations on this article, but I know what you went through to write it. So I want to commend you for sticking up for these women and letting their stories be heard and honoring their stories, and for even coming on this podcast to talk about it. I don't think any of this is easy for you too.
Yeah, no, I actually really appreciate you allowing me to talk about like what went into it, because I really, there's this refrain out there of like fake news and the media, like we make stuff up. And if people really knew what went into these stories, I would never undertake something like this against a person that I've known if I didn't, want to tell these women's stories, and if there weren't multiple people telling me similar stories with patterns, including men who were witnesses to this alleged behavior as well, like that is not in my nature. As I said, I just want to go to concerts for a living.
Well, we'll get you back to that, hopefully. Is there anything that you would like to add? Anything I didn't ask you that you think is important for people to know?
Anyone who takes the time to read it, it's very long. It's a very hard read. So I appreciate you for taking that time. I know people like bite-sized news these days. It's an important story on so many levels, and not just there's this guy in the music industry. It's like there's a bigger picture here, whether it's how Noire was treated by the police back then, the changes from the Me Too movement. Maybe there's some kind of lesson on what can be done like at a smaller company to look into things like this more thoroughly, let's say. And also maybe there's some kind of help like for the women after whose lives have been destroyed by these types of behaviors. And,
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking about your Samaritan, and maybe there is something there, maybe with a charity and a huge cause behind it, right?
Yeah, I would love to bring Samaritan back. Like, we have great jobs, right? We talk to interesting people, we go to concerts, we listen to music. And I started Samaritan because that was my way of giving back, because I'm not wealthy and, can't build a house and I'm not a doctor. not famous. So this was my way of telling these incredible stories, big and small, about people trying to make a difference. And, the animal rights stories were the most popular, I think, but also all these amazing musicians with this platform that are doing good. And then even the corporations, I don't look at them as big, bad, evil corporations because they're run by human beings. And there's always something that touches those people's lives, and they pick a charity or two and will support that. And I really want to bring it back and do it properly.
Yeah.
And I will. I just need to get a bit of work as a music journalist.
I feel like there's just so many stories out there that have yet to be told about women experiencing sexual violence of any sort. And if there's a way to further shine the light on those stories in an interesting way, I don't know. I feel like there's something there.
I would like to see more men stand up for women.
Thank you.
Doing this story, there were incredible, and there are incredible men that not just spoke to me for this article, but have spoken to me afterwards. I'm not going to name them, but
of course,
just at the top of their field, whether it's musicians or heads of companies, just their compassion and insight and understanding into what these women went through, and even what I went through writing the article. It's just been amazing. And they want to talk about it. That's the thing. Every time I see them, anytime I go somewhere now, someone wants to talk about this article and ask me questions and express how they feel. It's been an equal number of men and women, and there's some solid guys in this industry for sure.
I agree. And there's some shitty ones too. And I think the best thing that could happen out of a terrible, tragic story like this and these allegations is that instead of men coming forward in reaction to an article like this, that there is something before, something proactive. Tell us what you're doing in your company. Tell us what you're doing with your team to make sure these things don't continue to happen. So I always end the Women in Media podcast this way, and I'm not about to stop for this season. I would like to hear about some women that you would recommend coming on this podcast to share their stories, women you admire.
Tracy Melcher. I would love to see you interview her.
I have not had her on
fantastic. Yet. Charlotte Thompson, publicist for Nickelback and many, many other acts.
She's a popular nomination. She's going to hate it. She hates doing this kind of stuff, but I feel like when the time is right, she will.
Denise Donlin, if you had Denise on.
Haven't had Denise, also a popular nomination. And if this means anything, it's that Charlotte and Denise are in high demand. So let's go.
Christina Fernandez as well. There's so many incredible women in this industry that
I know it's hard to pick.
Amazing stories, and they persevere. And
I will give Christina Fernandez a little shout out right now too, because when I was in the early stages of developing this podcast, her and I had some great late night phone calls. Just so many fabulous women, including yourself. I'm going to say thank you once again for taking the time. I've wanted to talk to you about this for a long time, and kudos, job well done on that article and honoring those women.
Thank you so much.
What happens when we play outside? We become healthier, both mentally and physically. We become more creative and more focused. We connect with nature, each other, and ourselves. Let's Take This Outside, a new podcast hosted by me, Marianne Iveson, an aspiring outdoor athlete and nature lover. I speak to athletes, outdoor professionals, and scientists about their connection to nature, how it affects their performance, and everyday life. Let's Take This Outside, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, and at letstakethisoutside.ca.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.